Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to participate in this important community discussion. I'm Representative Matthew Dowling, serving the 51st Legislative District in Fayette and Somerset counties. Tonight we kick off the first of a series of community conversations through our new public participation panel. And I know, being the week of Easter, there are a lot of people with conflicts, and I know many of you in the room had to rearrange your schedule. So I really do sincerely thank you for being with us tonight. As a reminder, tonight's meeting is being recorded for audio and video rebroadcast. You will be able to find this meeting archived at repdowling.com in the days to come, and will also be made available to local cable providers who may show this on their stations at their discretion. Now, all of us in this room can agree that drug use is first and foremost a problem for the individual drug user. However, an individual's drug use becomes a community problem when a significant number of people are engaged in epidemic use, or when the community does not have the adequate resources to deal with the problems that arise from addiction. And we're experiencing that here in Fayette and Somerset counties. In January, my office hosted a meeting for the House Majority Policy Committee, where the Auditor General for the state, Eugene D. Pasquale, testified on his State of the Child report, which focused on children and youth services and their relationship to the opioid crisis that's fallen upon the entire Commonwealth. Before that hearing even took place, we realized in putting together the agenda that this conversation was so big that we couldn't conclude it in one afternoon. There were so many aspects that we needed to discuss and to talk about as a community. There were so many more aspects of addiction and areas of life that addiction affects that we decided to put in place this conversation that we are starting. That's why I wanted to provide an outlet to educate my constituents and shine light on the issues at hand and those who are working to help solve them. Now, I understand that there are some people in the community that think that sufficient light has already been shined upon this issue. However, the light shined upon this issue is not bright enough to destroy the stigma of addiction, which holds back so many from being open in this discussion. I want to be clear about what I see as expectations from these meetings. First and foremost, as a legislator, I'm expected to make decisions on a wide range of topics. That's one of the things that I was most surprised about after taking office, that you become an expert in addiction, an expert in different facets of the law, an expert in road conditions. So there's a wide range of topics that we need to know about. And because I can't be an expert on every issue facing the people of the 51st District, I really get a lot out of these conversations, or conversations that I'm able to have with people who do work in these fields on a daily basis. So these help me, when I go back to Harrisburg, to look at legislation that's proposed, to decide what legislation I need to help fight for, and how I'll vote on different issues. Public meetings allow for dialogue between elected officials and their constituents. Meetings like this one tonight give the public a voice, and nobody should ever want to shut that voice out, because the public's opinion means so much. The second outcome that I hope to see from these meetings, and perhaps more importantly, the outcome that I'm looking for, is that the information that we share here through these meetings will help us form community-based solutions. Government cannot provide all of the answers to our community's drug problem, or to any problem. Government does need to provide the resources, the laws, the funding, etc. But some of the best solutions to this problem will be organized within our churches, our school PTA groups, through our YMCAs, our scouting organizations, our libraries, and with the support financially from our local business owners. Our goal tonight is not just to listen and to take notes and to compile a report and let it sit on a shelf. Tonight, I'd encourage each and every attendee to listen for ideas and develop ways, whether they be big or small, that you can help fight this epidemic through. I want to take a moment before we begin the conversation to thank the Mountain Fellowship Center for their hospitality tonight. They were great in opening this facility up for us. I want to thank those organizations who are registered to be partners on our public participation panel. A list of our partners to date can be found on the back of the agendas that were distributed at check-in and are also available at repdowling.com under our public participation panel page. These organizations who have become partners with us through this panel, we're going to be looking forward to help us provide subjects that we need to talk about in the future, experts who are able to provide some of those answers, and perhaps resources just like a room that we can have these meetings in. Our goal is to move these meetings that will happen every other month throughout the 51st Legislative District. One of our key partners in this effort is the Fayette County Drug and Alcohol Commission. They play a huge role in prevention, treatment, and a multitude of other aspects of addiction within Fayette County and that part of the 51st Legislative District. I wanted to give just a few minutes here before we get into tonight's topic to their Executive Director, Jana Kyle, who wants to just share some thoughts with us. So Jana, if you'd like to come up.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very grateful to be here to speak for a few minutes in front of you. And I am also grateful for you to be here to listen. I think it's very courageous of you that you are here being willing to hear what is being said. First off, I want to clear what addiction is. Addiction is a chronic disease. It's a compulsive disease. It's a thing that's difficult to control. In spite of many harmful consequences, it's disease that affects people. It can lead to changes in the brain, so it is a brain disease. And because of continued use and the way the brain works, the consequences, even though harmful, are not as important as the addiction itself and dealing with that addiction. We're talking tonight about faith-based treatment, and I also want to state that there is no one way and there is no one right way to recovery. It is a very individualized process, but religion has a place for many people in the recovery process. The beliefs of religion, the rituals, the relationships within a religious community can serve as a very important framework towards recovery. The faith-based community and what it does with a family, as well as with an addict who is working towards recovery, is so beneficial because the disease of addiction affects everyone. It affects the addict, it affects those around them, family, friends, it affects their work life, their home life, their religious life, their community life. So this is a disease that's community related. Our faith-based community can also be a great area for celebration of recovery because it can be a great support for anyone based on what their own religious beliefs are, and their community can help support that recovery process. Because recovery is not a one and done, it's a continuous process. And the other thing I would like to leave you with is, with addiction and with treatment of addiction, it is best conducted out of respect for and within a religious and cultural heritage and the personal belief that each person brings to their recovery. So it's a very personal process, and one that our religious community has a big and important component in helping. We don't have to have our religious communities do the treatment, but it's very helpful if our religious communities support the treatment of any addiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana, and thank you also to Melissa and Erica who joined us this evening from Fayette County Drug and Alcohol. At the conclusion of the night, I encourage you to go over and talk to them a little bit. They do have some resources about the programs that they offer, and like I said, they are a great resource to our community. At these meetings, as I alluded to, or as was mentioned in the articles leading up to tonight's meeting, we will be focusing on a different facet of addiction. Coming very soon, we'll be talking about EMS and first responders, the use of Narcan, methadone and Suboxone, and prevention programs that exist out there. And each of these topics will be focused on through their own meeting, which we'll be having throughout the district. But our topic this evening, as Jana said, is faith-based treatment. Now, I had the opportunity to join Carla, who is one of our panelists tonight, on a tour of a faith-based facility that has a fantastic track record in Cambria County. And they're just doing wonderful things up there and working with the court system in Cambria County. I was extremely impressed. In addition to Carla, I was also joined by a childhood friend of mine who has struggled with addiction, is successful in recovery, but didn't have the access to this particular faith-based program. And he shared with me his thoughts on how beneficial a program like this could have been to him. And that's one of the reasons we're having this discussion here tonight as one of the first topics that we tackle. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to our panel. They will each talk for a period of 5 to 10 minutes. Following their remarks, there will be time for questions and discussion from the public. We have a microphone up front that you'll be able to ask questions and they'll be able to respond. I'll help to moderate that. But now at this time, Carla, I'd turn things over to you and ask if you would introduce the other members of the panel.
Hello. Thank you for having us. This is Pastor Aaron. He is from a church in Masontown. And this is Thomas Coldren, who is a recovering addict who has much testimony to give tonight. And I want to thank Representative Dowling for having us. I attended the last hearing that was at the Stonehouse and was very impressed with the information that was given, and I agree that this needs to be a community effort because, as Janet said, this does not just affect the addict, this affects the family, it affects the whole community. So it's awesome to see people that are showing interest and wanting to hear and learn more about it, because I think I know that part of the problem that we that are on the front lines of treating addiction face is fighting the battle of the stigma. And I think much of the stigma is because people just don't understand. And that's understandable, because even those of us that have been in the field for a while, it takes time. It takes time to even wrap your mind around what you're dealing with. So I want to say this very quickly, that I've had the opportunity, after years of being in the field of human services and social work, and I'm going to use this word, to be called into drug and alcohol. And after having done that, I've been given the opportunity to work in several different levels of treatment and different philosophies of treatment, different methods, and they've all been beneficial to me in helping me to get a well-rounded ability to both understand and to treat this disease of addiction. And one of the places that I trained was a 13-month, as Representative Dowling said, a 13-month long-term faith-based holistic treatment center that has incredible results. They've been in practice for over 30 years and have gained the reputation in Cambria County with the judges, with state parole, and with the county probation as a minimum security reentry rehab because of their low recidivism rate. They actually follow their clients for over 5 years, and their statistics show that they have a success rate of 80%, and that's after 5 years. So, when we talk about what is faith-based, that's what I'm going to present tonight, what my experience has been and what I've seen to be very valuable in being successful as well as we can be. And I'm going to start by saying we as human beings are designed by our Creator with 3 spheres. We are body, we are mind, and we are spirit. And a person in addiction, all 3 of those areas are affected. So for healing to take place, all 3 need to be addressed. And, I'm going to talk about a medical model of holistic, faith-based, because all those 3 areas need to be treated. So quickly, I'm just going to talk about, the medical component needs to be there, because the first step for an addict has to be for them to gain some kind of stability through withdrawal and detoxification. And medical monitoring and medical treatment needs to be there, because oftentimes not only is it uncomfortable, but it can actually be life-threatening and dangerous depending on what the drug is or how long they've used it. So that is a necessary component. And another reason is, an addict comes into treatment, and if they're not helped with that withdrawal process, it kind of gives them an excuse to go back and use again, because it is tremendously, tremendously uncomfortable. And the program that offers medical, component provides a more complete healing process. And because most of the time an addict's body has been neglected because of their addiction. And so we develop what we call co-occurring disorders, both physically, mentally, emotionally. And those things have to be stabilized before they can begin to start utilizing the other components of the therapy that any rehab is going to give, and that is the spiritual, possibly, and the psychological, coaching and the teaching. I want to say this, that one of the things that I believe, like I said, the stigma results from a lack of knowledge and education, is addiction is not a choice. I don't know anybody that I've known or that I've treated that decided that they wanted to be an addict. That isn't the case. Addiction results from an inner core issue or issues that the addict is attempting to self-medicate with toxic substances and or activities. And it's a response to human unhappiness and human suffering. And when people are distressed, they want to soothe that distress. And when they're in pain, they want to soothe that pain. So my question, I think the question is, when we're looking at this opioid crisis, is not so much why the addiction, it's why the pain? Why so much pain? And I'm going to say this, 2 of the core issues, when you're dealing with an addict, one of the things that I find, and I believe, statistics will say maybe 40 to 50%. I personally believe it's higher. I think it's more like 90% of addicts have core issues of childhood trauma or severe social stress. And it's those 2 things that drive the addiction. And then once the addiction starts, now it's complicated by the results of what the drug does to the brain activity. So I say that to say that, if a child is in a home that is, let's say, dysfunctional to the point that it's unstable, it's abandonment, it's severe dysfunction, You know, many of the female clients that I've treated, so many of them have suffered sexual abuse. You know, many today, how many marriages stay together? Children who are in broken homes and dad's gone. You know, these are all issues that feed the addiction. And what's sad is and this is why I believe in a long-term treatment, because so many times, you know, we send somebody to treatment for 30 or 14 days, and personally, I'm just going to say, I believe all that is detoxification, because it is not enough time for even the therapist or the client to be able to recognize or even understand what they are truly suffering with. So, you know, it's like I tell my clients, if you don't know what's broken, you can't fix it. You can't fix what you don't know is broken. And so, you know, they go into 14 or 30-day rehabs, they get some detoxification, they might get some information, and because they relapse, and it's consistent relapse, now the message to them is, you're never gonna make it, all you are is a junkie, you know, and it just adds to the shame, it adds to the trauma that they already have. And then people who don't understand, the families, the communities, look at them like, you know, they're not worth it. It's ridiculous. You know, I hear people say about Narcan, you know, hit them once, and if they don't get it, you know, then oh well. And I understand the frustration, you know, because of the lack of education, but it's important for our communities to begin to understand what we're dealing with. And I think that core of addiction is so not treated. I'm sorry, but I feel like so many times that what we're treating are the symptoms and not the root issue. So, and you know, the conversation in the mainstream media and the political circles, and I'll step out and say even in many media circles, largely excludes the central importance of trauma and stress in the overall root cause of addiction. They continue to talk of addiction as if it was simply a choice that someone makes. You know, the attorney Jeff Sessions talked about reviving the old Nancy Reagan, just say no. I think where you just tell people how bad drugs are and then they won't use them. And I'm all about prevention, and I'm all about getting that message out there, but when you're dealing with a child who has abandonment issues, abuse issues, you can give him all the information you want, but if you don't help him with those mental health and psychological issues, he's going to find some way to soothe that pain. And let me say this, we can talk all day about controlling the availability of drugs. They're going to find something. They're going to find something. I mean, I personally have watched alcoholics who, you cut them off, they'll drink tons of hand sanitizer, vanilla by the bottles, anything they can get their hands on. Not because they want to stay that way, it's because they are in such pain and they don't know how to fix it. So, you know, I'm all for a long-term rehabilitation. And the other thing is, I personally believe that giving them hope through, because, you know, oftentimes one of the things that happens is if they didn't already have a low self-identity and low self-esteem, through the addiction, they've gained that, through the shame. So replacing their need for fixing the pain with a substance or an activity is helping them to understand who they are seen and who they are with God. And that's really what the 12 steps originally were given. That's why it's been the only really answer for recovery, is as a result of working these 12 steps and now having had a spiritual awakening, I can now carry the message to others. So my message is, I just feel the importance of education about the root cause of addiction and treating the root cause and providing a holistic approach to help with those issues. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Well, good evening. My name is Aaron Douthit. I am the lead pastor of Bridge Baptist Church in southwestern PA in a place called Masontown, also known as the Bridge. And I can tell you right now the ins and outs of all this. Carla's going to be your go-to person because she knows a lot more about it than I do. I'm not an expert on addiction or anything like that. But what I do know is I know God and I know people. And that's why I'm here. I actually literally just heard about this yesterday. I'm not going to lie about that. So I just found out about this. But Thomas is a dear friend of mine, and I just met Carla. She's very sweet. And when I hear faith-based, Bible-based, I'm a Bible guy, so I'm there. If it's Bible-based, I'm going to be there. I think anything Bible-based is awesome, and anything Bible-based is going to improve any community, any city, any people. So just to tell you a little bit about my story, and then I'll just have 3 points for you, and then I'll be done tonight. But my story is I became a Christian. I became a follower of Jesus when I was 17 years old. Came out of a life of drug addiction and alcoholism. It runs very deep in my family. My life was a mess, and through various circumstances, one night I found myself sitting down in front of the Gospel of Mark, and there was a particular account in the Gospel of Mark that stood out to me. It was a man who referred to himself as Legion. He was possessed with at least 2,000 demons. And this man was, the community tried to do everything they could do to help. They would do what finite attempts a man would try to do in that day. They would tie him up in chains and they'd bind him so he wouldn't hurt himself or be a harm to the people. But he would break out of those chains because it was a supernatural problem. And when he broke out of those chains, he would terrorize the village, terrorize the people, and he'd be a threat to himself. He would even be found at night in the graveyard. He'd be cutting himself with stones and weeping, tormented by his demons. And as a 17-year-old kid, I found myself in the Bible in that moment, and I realized this is me. And I'm chained up, and I don't know how to get out of not only my addiction, but I've got a lot more problems than addiction. I've got a whole life that's a mess. And that addiction started somewhere, and the Bible would call that sin. I'm a sinner. And I saw myself in the shoes of this man, and I saw that I wasn't literally cutting myself with stones, but I was afflicting myself with drugs and alcoholism. And I was a mess. And I saw that Jesus Christ could come to this man and set him free. And I knew that's what I wanted. And I heard about Jesus, and I'd heard about the Lord, and I grew up. My grandfather was a great man of God. So he had told us about Jesus, but never really understood who he was personally, never came into a relationship with Jesus yet. Until that moment as I was reading that gospel account, and I was hooked. And I couldn't put the Bible down. I read through the entire gospel that night. And for the first time in my life, as I got to the end of the Gospel of Mark, I saw Jesus literally being crucified for me. He wasn't just being crucified, but he was being crucified for me. I saw him buried, not just to be buried, but buried for me. And I saw him risen from the grave to vindicate the reality that he is the Savior, he is God, he is the Messiah, and he conquered sin, Satan, death, and hell for me. So that night I gave my heart to Jesus, and I like to tell our church all the time, I met Jesus when I was 17, and I've yet to get over him. He changed my life, and from that day forward, I began to preach the gospel, and I began to tell people about Jesus. So that's my story as far as what I've come out of. I never went through any program, never went through anything. I met Jesus, and he changed me. And that's all I can tell you. That's my story, and that's what we continue to see at our church, out at the Bridge in Masontown. They just call us the Bridge Baptist Church. But we have much of our congregation are people who have come out of drug addiction. They come out of alcoholism, and that's their story. The same story as mine. They met Jesus. They were changed. And so that's the life I've come out of, drug addiction. And it changed. The chain breaker was Christ. So just 3 things about why I think a biblically based recovery system would be great for a community. First thing is this, and I understand not everybody's going to agree, but I'm a pastor, so obviously, not everyone agrees with the preacher, but I'm a preacher for a reason. Number 1, just 3 words for you guys, and then I'll be done. Realization, transformation, and implementation. I'll get it out eventually. Realization, transformation, and implementation. Those 3 words are just 3 words that came to my mind. The first one is realization, and just 2 things about realization. There's a real problem here, and it's not just addiction. There's a problem with the heart. There's a problem with the inner man. The Bible refers to that as sin. And sin because we're sinners, we're broken, we're marred. It's not just addiction. There is some serious rooted problem there that we need to get to, and that's what we do at the church. That's what we do with the Word of God. As a matter of fact, the Bible says that the Word of God is quick, it's powerful, it's sharper than any two-edged sword, pierces even to the dividing asunder of the joints and marrow and the soul and spirit, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. So that Word is supernatural and gets to the heart, it gets to the root problem. It brings people, just like it did to me when I was 17 years old, it brought me face to face with Jesus and changed my life supernaturally by the power of the Holy Spirit through His Word. So realization is this: we have a real problem. I believe it's a sin problem. I don't believe it's just an addiction problem. That addiction comes from a sin nature that we all have. The Bible calls us sinners. We're broken. So that's the real heart problem. So only a biblically based program is going to be able to shoot it straight to people and say, you're a sinner, you're broken, you're marred. It's not just addiction, but there's a more deep problem there. You're broken and you need restored, and I believe only Jesus can do that. Which brings me to the next thing about realization. Not only is there a real problem, but there's a real hope. And I don't know about you guys, but come Sunday morning, especially this Sunday, we're going to be celebrating a real risen Savior. We're going to be celebrating a real empty tomb. That there were real guards standing by who were terrified, who couldn't do anything about the fact that the stone was rolled away. And there was a Messiah who claimed the 3rd day, I'm going to rise from the dead, and He did that. So there's a real hope there. He's a living hope. His name is Jesus. And the only way we can possibly explicitly represent Jesus to people and tell people about Jesus explicitly and clearly as if it's a Bible-based program, obviously, so that we could have the liberty to do that. And then the second thing is transformation, and this one is kind of ties into the first one a little bit, just again about my testimony. The only thing that's going to transform, I should say the only one who's going to transform somebody from the inside out is going to be God. The Lord Jesus Christ has that power to change us from the inside out. He does the inner work. The outflow of that is going to be the healing process, which is when there begins to be real recovery. You're looking at a guy to my right here. He's part of our church, member of our church. We grew up together, and I've walked through this whole process with Thomas, and through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what's caused him to rise above is his faith and his relationship with Jesus Christ. So I believe that real transformation, again, comes from Jesus. And then the last thing is implementation. When you can really present the realization that there's a real problem, and it's not just addiction, but it's sin, and there's a real hope, and His name is Jesus, and then you can have that real transformation of the heart and lives of people. Then you can have this implementation where now you can take these people, and the beauty of having a biblically based recovery program is I would think a biblically based recovery program would want to work with local churches. So what would be awesome about that is now you get the community together, you get churches together, and they can actually implement this whole faith life, this relationship, this life with Jesus, to where it's one of the glorious things about it is going to be recovery. It is going to be a life that overcomes all kinds of sin and has all kinds of healing as they walk hand in hand and heart to heart with Jesus. So what the beauty of a biblically based program is you have an avenue now that you can drive down, and the avenue is the local church. You can work with local churches. You get these people plugged into good Bible-believing churches, and now they got pastoral leadership over them that shepherd them, care for them, pour into them, along with a community that's knit together that's going to support them. So realization, transformation, implementation. I love Jesus. I'm a Bible guy. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Thomas Coldren. I've been battling addiction for 17 years. I'll have a year clean May the 5th. And thank you. And I've tried so many different ways. I've tried the scientific way. I've tried the doctors. I've used different avenues to try to get a different result, and it's never worked out. I've tried the maintenance programs, and it just led me right back into it. This is my experience, and this is what definitely went through with it. But I was saved 2011, and it took 7 years for me to actually stop using. For 6 years, I was saying, I'm a Christian, and I never opened up that book. Well, then I went to jail for a little bit, and I sat in there and I read every day. And towards the end, I stopped reading for about 2 weeks. And it was like, well, here you go. And I got into a fight. And I got hurt, and they put me in a cell by myself. And he said, now you got to keep reading. And that's where it definitely began with me, was right there. And the more I get plugged into this, and the more I get plugged into my Christian family, the easier this walk has been. So with a faith-based program, long-term, that's something I want to talk about. The other treatments that I've done 10, 14, or 28-day treatments to where I would go in for 14 days or 28 days, and within the first 24 hours, I was using again. And I've done more detoxes, just detox, than I could count. I couldn't even tell you how many I did with that. And every time I've walked out of those places, within 24 hours, I was right back at it. And that's why I believe with a faith-based treatment center that's long-term, because it takes that long. It takes the long-term to get your mind to even start thinking right. It took 6 months for me to start thinking normal. And I'm nervous, I'm sorry. It's the first time I really had to do this. But like I said, 2006, I started using when I was 13. In 2006, I went to a maintenance program, and I spent a year in it, and I tried doing everything that was said. And after that year, I was off. Within a week, I was using again. So that full year, I just did the treatment that they offered, and then I went back at it again. I was back on the streets again, getting high every day, and then I tried another maintenance program. And within 6 months, I did it for 6 months, and right after that was over, I was right back at it, because I instantly got sick all over again. I instantly felt that same pain, but I didn't have the word in it. I didn't have the structure that you needed, because God gave us this. This is our daily. If you read this daily, He's going to teach you something for sure. So, but that's what I tried. I tried every other way possible. This is the one way that has worked. And that's all I have.
Well, we definitely want to thank our panelists for sharing with us this evening. What we would like to do now is to open up the conversation. Because we are recording the audio, we'd ask that you use the microphone. But if you have a question for our panelists up front or want to engage in discussion, we'd ask that you make your way up to that microphone and ask any questions you may have. You're welcome to direct them to one of the three panelists or just to the group in general.
First.
Thank you, Lisa.
First off, I want to thank both of you for sharing your story, because I know it's very difficult, and that's part of recovery, sharing your story. Now to Carla Bullish, when you commented about the length of time that you're in rehab, and just yesterday I was in a meeting when I spoke about, I talked to addicts from the 70s. I said, how many times have you been to rehab? And they'll say, once. And they've been in recovery 20 years now, or 30 years. But they were there 6 months. Then I talked to someone that was addicted to crack, late 80s, early 90s, one time, and they're fully in recovery, doing well. how long were you in rehab? 3 months. And now you're telling me the 7 days, 14 days is just not enough time. I'm not saying faith-based is a very important part of that, but that initial rehabilitation is just not enough. I know there's folks that don't want to stay as long. They have that choice. You have to be committed to want to get clean as well, but I don't know what the answer is. I know at least our local Drug and Alcohol Commission is willing to pay for longer, but as far as insurance companies and what have you, I don't think they will pay past that 14 to whatever the days are. And you know more about that. If you could, is that been your experience or?
Well, and that is one of the frustrating things is again, I think that, I think that there's a lack of knowledge of what the root cause is, and I know there's a lot of, what's the word I want to use, different opinions, let's just say that, of the root causes of addiction. But I can tell you that the science is proving about the brain, like Janet talked about. There's a lot, we could do a whole night on just what the addiction does to the brain, okay, depending on what the drug is and how long they've used it, also depending on what their setup. And when I say that to you, I'm talking about the progression of the dysfunction in both social, psychological, and spiritual aspects of our society that these kids are now experiencing, as opposed to years ago. And I say that to say that, years ago, someone could go into treatment for alcoholism and maybe not have to be there as long. But personally, I don't think that's the case because there's a difference in abstinence and sobriety. We have the whole thing about the dry drunk syndrome. That's another thing that people don't understand. But again, it's getting to that root issue, and we can't, a person's brain is not capable of firing even, appropriately to be able to take in any kind of psychological or spiritual teaching or coaching until the brain starts to settle down and come out of a withdrawal. The fact is, depending on what you put into the brain, if you snort a line of cocaine, there's 3 areas of the brain that it's going to affect, and that's the adrenaline, the endorphins, the dopamine, okay? And what happens is, the brain loves that. So, but if you, and what it does is it releases, say, 3 times the amount of dopamine and endorphins that a brain normally releases as supposed to. If you use crack cocaine now, at least triple that. So what happens is the brain gets so overwhelmed and the receptors that are naturally there can't process that. So what happens is, just for survival's sake, the receptors start to shut down, okay? So again, it's individualized. It depends on what they've used, how long they've used, and what type of, I'm going to use the word co-occurring disorder they have incurred due to their life, whether it be PTSD, whether it be childhood trauma because of abandonment. All these things come into play. That cannot be answered overnight, and it cannot be answered in 14 days. It cannot.
You mentioned about issues in childhood, and then you said social stressors. What are some of the examples of social stress?
Well, years ago, I know when I was growing up, the amount of divorces and the amount of broken homes wasn't what it is today, okay? It's rare now to find a child who is in a home with mom and dad with consistency and low stress, because that's what our society is doing today. Mothers have to work full-time, dads are gone, dad's in jail, dad's using, and believe me, that affects that child's ability to be develop in his brain appropriately and learn how to deal with life on life's terms. They have a very low capability of dealing with stress because they're not being nurtured that way, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. But we're also seeing where, and I know the picture perfect doesn't really exist, but families that have been together forever. People that are in their 40s and 50s are using, they came from very stable home lives. So I don't know if we were ever going to know what exactly, but I do appreciate the comment. No one wakes up and says, hey, I think I'm going to be a heroin addict today.
Right.
Might wake up and say, I think I'm going to be a doctor or something. No one does say that, I don't think. I don't think anyone would say that. And it just happens. Whatever the stress may be at that time, the first time you use it feels good. And then that continues to deal with all of your stress, I would assume, regardless if it's familial, family issues. But Aaron, I wanted to ask you, how long were you using before you found the Bible and the faith base?
I got into drugs when I was in 7th grade. So 7th grade to the time I was 17, so however old I was, and I'm not
About
good at
5
math.
years.
12, 13 years old. Started with marijuana, and from marijuana got into drinking, and from drinking went into cocaine. So those are really my three, avenues of addiction. It was marijuana, drinking, and cocaine. So 7th grade to the age of 17.
Did you go to church every Sunday and everything with your family, like nothing was going on, or no?
No.
Okay, so you found this after.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And if I could ask you, what was your introduction? What was your intro drug?
The first alcohol.
And then,
At 13, it was alcohol and marijuana. And from 13 to 30, I was in active addiction. It's almost 18 years.
well, congratulations. It's going to be a year. Really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Emily.
And for you, it's like hitting rock bottom and finding the book, right?
Yeah, well, it was like I used to call myself a Christian, but I never read that book. So he was just like, here, go sit in this cell for a little bit. Now you can read. And that's all I did. And then when I stopped, he put me in a cell by myself to read some more.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
When I
That's
came
good.
out, I dug into it a lot when I was in there.
So when you said your Christian family, and then I promise I will sit down, that became your support system. As far as your neighborhood or your friends from during that time, I assume you were not able to.
He was my best friend since 7th grade.
Oh, you guys were partners in crime, were you?
Yeah, we got in a lot of trouble together.
Well, God bless you, and thank you so much, and thank you, Carla. And I know a lot of good things from Cambria County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Other questions or comments that we have from the audience?
Carla, you said that you were with the Hope for Recovery program. You're with the Hope for Recovery.
I am.
The 80%, 80% success rate over 5 years. Was that what you were referring to?
No, I'm sorry. No, that was a time when I was working as a drug and alcohol counselor at a long-term, 13-month faith-based program in Cambria County. Their success rate has been shown to be at 80%.
Could you tell us a little about the program that you work for? And even with Thomas and Aaron, if you could, having experienced this yourself, if you could tell us what in your experience would be the ideal program, if you could create one for someone that you think through your experience would be successful. Because I think for someone like me, it's hard for me to maybe understand if I haven't been through that, but maybe someone who's been through it can say, if I had, if God came down and said, you can create whatever program that you think would be extremely successful, what would it be?
With me, I think the most successful program would be to where it was faith-based, biblically based program that had medical staff on site for the detox process, because that's where the first few weeks is where most people, they leave the rehab, they're out, they're not doing it anymore. So if you have somebody there for the detox process to take care of those people, and then get their minds starting to work right, and then have a faith-based classes and long-term, 6 to 12 months. Like, that's the only way that it's going to work. 'Cause, I mean, even longer than 6 months, because those first 6 months is what it takes to even to start feeling normal and feeling to where you feel right, you know. And then you have both sides of it. You have the medical team, you know, like Carla said, the 12 steps came from the Bible. So if you have the counselors that can teach the 12 steps with Scripture, then I think that's going to be the most successful treatment center.
And I think in addition, Thomas, is again, you know, we can't leave out the psychological needs that, again, address those root issues that either contributed to or resulted from the addiction. And usually they're both there. And so that, again, you know, I want to stress it requires all three being addressed: the mind, the body, and the spirit. So, you know, and let me say this, you know, I think sometimes I think faith-based programs get a bad name sometimes because, and I understand this, like there is a thing called spiritual transference for addicts, where an addict's addiction will attempt to transfer. They're going to use something until they deal with those core issues. So again, as I said, if you take their drug away and let's say give them an opportunity to use the computer and get on porn, they're going to get some dopamine and endorphins from that as well. Or sometimes working out. You give them an opportunity to go to the gym, and if they're not helped to learn how to do things in balance, they can overdo that. Well, an addict can also do that with what I'm going to say is religion. That is not true spirituality, okay? We're not talking about religious programs, because if the church could fix it, I promise you, people like Aaron and people that have the heart for God, that would want to help people, if they could fix it with just the church, that's what they'd do. But it doesn't work. It really, and my personal opinion, not that that matters, but you know, an ideal facility would be one that is trained to treat all three areas. Clinicians who are trained to know how to help a client after they've gotten their brain to the point where they can begin to take in some things, and then help them with the therapeutic things. You know, if they're diagnosed with PTSD, if they have eating disorders, we need to be able to help them with these things. And then the answer, the solution to their shame, their lack of identity, their guilt, all those things is where the spirituality comes in. You know, because as Aaron said, God says the transformation begins with the renewing of the mind. Well, in addiction, that isn't just reading the Bible, it's helping them with the brain chemistry, with the thought processes that have helped them become an addict or resulted from them becoming an addict, and from their hope and identity and who they are in Christ.
Can I add just one thing? I agree with both of you guys, obviously, you know, but everything you said was good. One thing, you know, Jana said earlier was she talked about working together, and I think that's the key. You know, you gotta work together, and God in His grace has graced us with people who've studied this and know this stuff, and they know the ins and outs of it, and that's key. We have to work together. So I think ideally there has to be some kind of coming together and working this. You got to have your specialists in place, and then, you know, so for me, what I would think of with this is, you know, if you could have your biblical counsel and your specialists just somehow, I don't know how all that works, but you just bring it together somehow, and people just saying, we want to help fix this, and let the Christians do what they do, let the specialists do what they do, and just work together. But I think of everything Thomas has gone through, and here's a guy who's just really battled it out for such a long time, and I'm super proud of him. And he's done it all. And so all of it, I'm sure he could tell you, has its pros and cons and ups and downs. And I have actually experienced some of that stuff Carla was talking about. Some people who it's kind of like one high from another high. And that can happen with religion. And I had one guy I remember I was counseling him, and he had come out of addiction. And he said, I'm just looking for that high that you have with Jesus. And I'm like, dude, it's not a high. It's not just some high that you're going to, it's a transformation of life. You haven't really met Jesus yet because he transforms the heart. So I watch for that as a pastor, because that can happen. And I think that's something that the church has to pay attention to, and understanding the ins and outs of the mind, the body, and the soul, like Carla said. So that's all I got.
Go ahead.
One of the other things that Janet mentioned is, the addiction is, I'm not using slogans, it's true. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. It just is. And a person who's caught up in the addiction they have to want treatment. They have to get to that place where they want it. And we talk about people hitting bottom, and that they need to hit some kind of a bottom, which Thomas talks about. He did, thank God. The problem today is, you see a lot of old alcoholics walking around. They can drink for years, and the unmanageability in their life isn't so bad that they're not dying as early, okay? But the addiction and the drugs and the insanity has progressed to a point now that we've got young people who don't live to be 20 years old. I mean, we've got children dying from touching fentanyl because it is so progressed. So there has to be intervention. And again, that comes, and I'm going to say this, one of the things that has to happen in education and a long-term treatment, I think, helps that, is family intervention. Because a family suffers. They're not designed to know how to deal with a daughter or a son who is in active addiction. They're a mom, they're a dad. That's how they feel about that kid. But then we as therapists look at them and say, just shut the door and tell them no, because they got to hit bottom. Well, that's easy to say to a mom and dad, but to get them to do that is a whole nother issue. So they need educated to the place where they understand the difference in loving that child and enabling that child. So again, I remember that when I went to the last hearing at the Stonehouse, I think it was Representative Warner, is that his name? He made the comment, and it really spoke to me. He said at the end, he thanked everybody, and he said, I have to say that, there is no one answer, there is no one problem. He said, but I do have to say this, and I so agreed with him. When we take God out of everything, this is what happens. And again, the 12 steps of recovery came from the Word of God. And the steps work when you work them, but the problem is people don't work them. And they're not getting the support, the safety environment, the other parts. Again, I don't want to get off on it, but again, it's just not any one thing broken. And I just pray that we as a community can come together, work together, and not be, politically and otherwise divided. And, well, this is my stance and this is your stance. But we need to come together and try to work together to do this the best that we can. So.
Carla, I want to take other questions from the audience and continue the discussion, but a question I have is on the availability of the type of programs that you're talking about. Do we currently have faith-based programs available in Fayette and Somerset counties? Are there waiting lists? Is there a need, I guess, is what I'm asking, and how are those programs being funded?
Well, the only program that I'm talking about, the model that I'm talking about, is in Cambria County, because it is long-term. It's 13 months. It is state licensed. However, they haven't moved to getting insurances to pay. I think that could happen. They just haven't done that because their fear of being compromised as a faith-based facility. But I do know other faith-based facilities that are supported by insurances. They are. But I'm not aware of any here at that level. I'm not saying that there aren't any faith-based people attempting to do treatment in our area, because there are. I work in a halfway house right now that is, the people I work with are Christians, and we offer as much holistic treatment as we can in that level, but it's a halfway house, and I'll be honest with you. Again, that's one of the things I think is broken, and it's not their problem, but they get people that go 14 days to treatment, and then they go into a halfway house. Well, they're not ready. They need longer-term, inpatient, holistic treatment before they're ready to transition. So again, I think that that's some of the legislation that needs to be looked at, are the levels of treatment. And yes, I'm wholeheartedly praying and hoping that we can establish a long-term faith-based facility here in Fayette County.
Sir?
I can offer just a few thoughts. I'm part of a nonprofit in Fayette County Small International Ministry, very active in the addiction process with community. Based on that, what we're here for tonight, if I understand it right, is to focus on faith-based. Carla, thank you for your presentation, Pastor Thomas. I think it was awesome because that's where we're headed tonight. What I see, and personally, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm a recovered addict for like 40 years, so I have some history behind me. That stress part you were talking about, talk to me later. We can talk about that for sure. All right. I'm only saying that to give you some credibility why I'm up here now. Representative Dowling, we don't have enough. You asked the question. I'm going to answer you directly. There's not enough faith-based facilities. Where we go from here is how do you help the active user, and you guys know all about it, how do you help the active user that's hit bottom and they went out? Carla, talk to this table up here, but I see a major problem that we need to address, and tonight's the best time to address it. If that active user has insurance, no problem, because now they can get the help they need. But if they don't, and they need rehab, where are they going to get $2,000 a month? That's where faith-based can come in, because the funds aren't there if they don't have insurance. Now, how about the ones that are functional? We have functional users out there that work, don't want to lose their job, hit bottom, they go and they try to get a treatment center, so to speak, outpatient. And here's what they hear. You don't have insurance? Well, we can do a cash basis. Starting with $600 a month. All right, so the problem, or one of the problems, I'm sorry, that we need to address, since tonight is faith-based, is where are those nonprofits that can help? Because we put the whole process out there, community help, churches, community of hope, discipleship ministries, I just mentioned a few. We need more. That's what tonight's all about. We can break down what addiction is. We wouldn't be here if we didn't know it was a problem. It's a terrible problem, and it's killing our kids. We need to get together if we're focused on faith-based, and we need to put some solutions together. I'm willing to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions or comments from the audience? Julie, thank you.
Question for Thomas. Did you have family that helped you when you did get out, besides your church family?
Yeah, once I got out, I did have close family.
Great.
that were still around after, like, the tough love still love, and they gave me tough love. Like, when I went to jail, I did not talk to him. Brother Aaron just gave me, Pastor Aaron gave me tough love too. Like I knew what was going on, and then once I got out, and then they seen the change in me a little bit. Family started coming back around. Everybody started coming back into my life, and my lives, and like I have my old job back. I'm an operations manager for a company in Washington, you know, and I'm dealing with a lot of things that I did to him. I'm dealing with it now with drug use and guys on the job and them treatment not available to them. Like, so, I mean, like, it's funny because everything's just flip-flopping. It's going exactly the opposite way.
I talked to a young man who told me that, and I never thought about this, but he was, I don't even remember what he told me he was hooked on, but he said when he got clean, when he became clean, the druggies were still after him to try it again. Like they didn't let him alone, and that really shocked me.
See, I haven't dealt with that issue.
Good.
I'm very confident in what I know, and me being a Christian, that a lot of those people, they see me and they turn around and walk the other way. So
Okay.
I definitely, I got blessed with that one.
Thank you.
I think the forum has been very good because I've had 4 or 5 questions and they've all been answered. So my question, though, is for you, Representative Dowling. You've listened to all of this, and I know that you are here to collect information. Where will help come through the state, through different areas? And I understand the community does have a very important responsibility, but I also would like to know where your office, where our representatives stand to help, to possibly, to be able to have something that Thomas was saying, that we would be able to have some sort of treatment for them, some place where maybe people with insurance and without insurance can come. But where is the responsibility there? And I'll take a seat so you can.
Sure. Definitely, I believe as we craft our state budget, funding is a major consideration because these programs are not inexpensive to run. So I think funding is a way that we need to continue to look at building going forward. I am very much a fiscal conservative. I believe that our state budget is out of hand at $32.5 billion, most likely at $33+ billion this year. We continue to fund different line items and special projects across the entire Commonwealth. And we need to look at cutting those special projects and funneling the money to Health and Human Services to fight problems like this. So I think first and foremost, that's a way that, you know, we can look at providing resources and support. And when I opened this evening, I talked about the fact that government's not going to be the solution to everything, but that's a resource we need to help provide for you. The other place is legislation that is just going to help with these issues. This year, there has been a package of bills, and this kind of gets away a little bit from faith-based, but goes to show what we're doing in the legislature. In January, when we had our policy committee hearing in Fayette County, and we brought people from around the state for that hearing, we talked a lot about parental rights for grandparents, and we now have a small package of bills that has been introduced bipartisanly, one of them by our Republican chairman, 2 of them by Democrats, and they have support of the entire House to move forward, and that will give additional rights to the grandparents who need to come in as a caregiver, whether it be in an intermittent period or permanently because a parent is unable to function as the primary caregiver for that child. So from conversations like this, we're able to take and extrapolate the needs. That's one of the things that we took from that meeting back in January. So we need to continue to provide you with resources. Money's definitely one of them, and it's not easy to find additional funding. But that's a key way we can help. Legislation in a plethora of different ways are ways that we can assist, whether it be the example I just gave or there's a huge push right now for mandatory treatment for people who have been revived with Narcan. That's a debate that's going on right now because currently legislation allows that person to turn away treatment from the first responders who are coming there. And I know that's something we'll be talking about at a future meeting like this. How can we help legislatively to provide additional resources for our first responders, for our police, for our EMS, and for our treatment facilities? So I hope that goes to answer your question in some ways.
Hi, my name's Georgette. I just wanted to thank you for speaking and for you as well. And I agree with a lot of things that y'all are saying. That excites me, Representative Dowling, what you said about the grandparents, because that's something my heart is in. My parents still have my children. Some of them are adopted out because of the addiction I was in. So it's something I fight for, is their rights. But I also work in the addiction field, and I agree with everything you all said, like the 83% rate. The home that I came from in New York, theirs is around that exact same. I know Teen Challenge is around that same amount. I also agree that there's no cookie cutter to it. You know, I mean, Jesus Christ set me free, but I had to do many, many things to keep that. You know, nobody gets it the exact same way. Like, I'm very excited that yours came and you were able to go in straight into the Bible and then go into your calling, you know. But God gives it to us, I think, in different ways, because to go towards the calling that we're going to do and to reach the people that we have to reach. And I also wanted to let you guys know, especially you, because you asked about, Representative, about the homes in Fayette County that are faith-based, and I work at Genesis House. And we are a faith-based holistic program. We're a long-term, 9 to 12 months. And we do teach everything there, as well as like putting people back out into the communities, getting them their jobs, teaching them classes on the addictive brain and on boundaries, and 12 steps followed with what you said. I now teach a 12-step class there that introduces scripture as well and where it's at in there. So we do have one in Fayette County, and I'm very excited to be a part of that team, and just wanted to inform you of that.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the work that you do. Other questions or comments this evening?
Hello, my name is Alan, and I want to commend you guys, especially you, Thomas. I've been recovering since 1977, and it's still a recovery process for me. I didn't become clean until about 85, because I turned my back on God, and that was a big problem for me in my recovery. I finally found him again. I'm getting turned around, and that may be a problem nowadays. A lot of kids have turned away from God and from the church. We have trouble trying to get kids coming to church now, because they don't believe in God. So that may be a problem there to look into. So we just have to work on that also. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you guys for being here tonight. My name is Jesse Pinto. I own Pinto Home Care Agency, and we do in-home care throughout the county. One of the biggest things that I see has increased is we're going to the homes taking care of a lot of people who have overdosed and have a lot of health problems associated with it, and now they need in-home care the rest of their life with some of the problems they're dealing with. So I usually ask them what their story is, you know how it started. Most of the time I agree with you, it's childhood trauma or tragedy or something that occurred when they were a kid and it never got over with. But one of the biggest things I hear too is in the last 5 years there was a lot of mental health funding that was cut down, and a lot of facilities that was shut down because of the result of that. And they felt they had nowhere to turn. They might not have insurance, might not have any money to pay for any counseling services. But one individual I referred to Chestnut Ridge that didn't have any insurances or anything to cover for their counseling. So they went in, they did 4 treatments. Their first bill was like $2,000 for going in for 4 counseling sessions. They're like, do you know where I can turn to help cover the cost of this? You know, we had no idea. I mean, is there any programs I can refer these people to help more with that funding, or do we need a battle for more, you know, mental health funding to help get these facilities back up and running, or like, what's your suggestion?
Well, my
For drug and alcohol counseling, for anyone who does not have insurance, there is counseling available free of charge. They need to contact Fayette County Drug and Alcohol. This is for inpatient, detox, rehab, halfway house, or outpatient. There is help available. Also, if somebody's insurance doesn't cover all of the services or there's a high deductible, Fayette County Drug and Alcohol will work with them to make sure that those are not a barrier for them to get treatment. So please call Fayette County Drug and Alcohol. Insurance or lack of insurance should not be something that causes someone not to get the help that they want and need.
And on the mental health side, that should not happen. There is
Right.
liability that's done, there's IFDCL, and as the county, we do pay, same as drug alcohol, they got rid of health administration, Chestnut Ridge. There should not be a bill that stops if you don't have insurance. So if there is that, would love to hear more about it, because that should not be the case. We're supposed to get treatment, same as Jan's talking about. If you have insurance and there's services that are not even eligible within the plan under commercial insurance, we will waive that, we do not pay penalties. But if your insurance will only pay a certain amount, and we need to make a difference, we do that. Also, if you have no insurance, the county per se, the county mental health system, really the true client is the working poor. So if it's not have insurance, anyone does not have insurance, they're on Medicaid, commercial insurance, we have funding for that. So I'm shocked to hear that someone's just originally doing like that, it upsets me. So if that is the case, I'm giving my business card, and please do so.
So those are 2 great resources, Fayette County Behavioral Health as well as Fayette County Drug and Alcohol. You can contact them directly. Also, you can always contact one of our constituent outreach specialists in our office who, no matter what your issue is, tries to help direct people to the right state or county organization. So they can contact us, and we can get you in touch, or you can contact them directly.
Okay, thank you. Now, the second part of the problem I see when I'm in the households is most of our clientele is 65 and over that when they're taken care of. Some of them, fixed income, can barely pay their bills, struggling. Yeah, they might go to 3 or 4 different physicians, doctors complain about some pain that they have, and get prescriptions at 3 or 4 different doctors for the same medications. They have young grandchildren in high schools that's taking this medication into the schools, and they're selling it to get grandma money to help pay her bills. And I think that's the biggest reason a lot of these kids are getting hooked, because we do have a lot of elderly to sell in their scripts because there's not enough opioid control, and they're allowed to go to pain clinics, different doctors, they'll go to the hospital, complain that something's going on, and they're getting these excessive amount of pills, more than what they need, and they're being sold, to help pay for stuff around the house.
Yeah. I worked for the state Medicaid Welfare Department for many, many years now. Unless that has changed, there was integrated into the system a red flag that would come up, especially if Medicaid or Medicare was paying for it, okay? And if they were doctor shopping, okay, and abusing that, usually a red flag would come up to the county assistance office, and then we would look into that, so I can't imagine that has changed,
Yeah,
but.
it's been a big increase in the last couple of years. My mom works at a pharmacy. She's been there for 20 years. I mean, I see how there's a lot of control out there, but I do see that there's not enough communication between the doctors and their you know,
Yeah.
what's going on, and they're getting excessive amounts, and it's like a big deal in the last 2 to 3 years that I see is happening in these households.
There has been recent legislation that passed the House that now allows our pharmacies to use a central database to check
Right.
prescriptions against each other. That's only been within the last year or so, and I know that the statistics we're seeing is that's starting to work to help fight that problem, because that was a huge issue. But that electronic database now, that new law has allowed pharmacists to have a little greater control in seeing what's being filled, whether they're doctor shopping or using multiple pharmacies. And something that we continue to study to see if that's working correctly. But there is a serious problem, not just with people that are doctor shopping. I was surprised after being in office for probably a month or so. I was doing a meet and greet with a senior agency, and they had informed me about a drug bust that they just did with a number of senior citizen participants. They cooperated with law enforcement to be able to do that. And some of the senior citizens looked at, and this is one of the issues we have with the opioid addiction, they looked at that prescription as being something that was safe because a doctor had given it to them, and they were only selling 1 or 2. They also thought that they were selling them to other seniors, because Johnny, their grandson, was helping them to do it. They were selling it to someone who didn't have insurance, who couldn't afford it, and what's 4 out of my bottle this month? There's a realistic problem with that going on, and people that we wouldn't classify or stereotype as being a drug dealer that is. It's there's grandmas out there that are involved in it.
Yeah.
Lisa?
All right, thank you.
January was piggybacked off the bill with the pharmaceutical database is, as of January 1, if a prescriber, if a doctor is not enrolled in Medicaid, and they prescribe medication, and that person takes it to the pharmacy, is either paid by Medicaid or will not be filled. And that's where this is all medical assistance, but if you're not medical assistance, if you don't accept medical assistance, so they don't pay cash. You get the prescription for them, you get the local pharmacy, they try to use their Medicaid card. And that was happening.
Sure.
So the database where you can catch that. So now if that kicks up, it's when the doctor is not in the Medicaid enrollment, that prescription will not be filled at all. So that just started in January.
There is an over-prescribing problem too. That's where a lot of this heroin epidemic started. It started with the doctors that you could just walk in and you could hand them $150 and then tell them what you wanted. And that's where it started. I think that, and it still goes on today, but that's exactly where the heroin epidemic, that's the beginnings of it, was right there. So, it was.
Now they got a full 30 prescription, 30 pills for a senior in 1 day, because it's all passive. So they took that and was it, for the thing. That's the other thing. They think, but there is a place for this pain medicine. There's a reason for it. There are people that need that for surgery, what have you. It's just the addiction that comes with it.
Well, and that's an interesting point that you bring up, because we do have a population that has a lot of geriatrics. We have a lot of senior citizens out there. Because of some of the regulations that have changed on prescribers, we now have some prescribers who are general practitioners who will not prescribe any opioid-based pills because they just don't want to be involved in that. I will tell you the other side of the story is that we get complaint calls from senior citizens that now have to go to an extra appointment a month because they're going to a pain management clinic. And there's a place for pain management clinics. I do fear that some of them, and I'm not talking about them locally, but as this becomes a bigger issue, some of them are turning into the pill mills that Thomas was describing as well. So we have a larger discussion to look at on how we adequately provide pain medication and treatment for those who are terminally ill, and what doses they're getting and who's able to prescribe them. And I think in our community, that's going to be an ongoing discussion. And it's a discussion that we have to have within our groups that are trying to fight addiction, because we want to limit these medications from getting into the wrong hands, but at the same point in time, we want to ensure that the terminally ill or those who have any chronic disease that need those types of medications still have access. I don't know if you want to follow up at all, Carl.
No, I'm in total agreement with you. I mean, again, opiates have been used for years, wasn't always an epidemic. So, there are appropriate times for people to be prescribed certain medications and used appropriately. That's just without saying. Again, we call this an opioid crisis, but I'm going to say this, and I don't know who would agree with me, but it isn't just an opioid crisis. We got a crisis we got an epidemic in benzodiazepines. We have an epidemic in nicotine deaths. We got problems with alcoholism, but because alcohol is legal and nicotine's legal, we don't look at it. And I will say that the deaths aren't there like they are. I mean, they are, but not in overdoses. People are dying from nicotine. I forget what the statistics are, but it's ridiculous.
I'm constantly reminded as I meet with Fayette County Drug and Alcohol, Erica, their preventionalist, always reminds me that nicotine and alcohol are the biggest items that people in our area are addicted to. And that's one of the reasons why when we formed this panel, even though newspaper articles and things focused on opioids, and I'm sure we will talk a lot about opioids as we move further, but we wanted to make sure that this was a panel on addiction, because no matter what it is that a person is addicted to, it can lead to other substances. I think Aaron and Thomas, you both had that experience and shared that with us this evening. Mm-hmm. Regardless of the type of addiction, I think that's something we need to focus on. We'll take just a couple more questions or comments if there are any additional.
I just have one more. So I have a question. Do you all feel, because this is something that's really been hitting me, you were talking a lot, Carla, about getting to the root issues, and that addiction is a disease, which I believe. A lot of Christians don't believe that, but I do believe that. I believe that I did have something wrong with me when I was born in my brain, because I believe that if Satan can come in and attack us with cancer in the world, then he can attack us in the womb before we're born, right? So I totally believe that. So do you think that it would be possible, like you said, to start targeting the children now to keep them from ever becoming addicts? Like we could possibly close the door to the addiction. Like some of the events that I'm going to be holding for children, I'm going to call them seal the door to addiction. And I believe that there's a way that we can seal that door biblically and teach the children that although they've been named with a disease because they were born or it's in their brain coming from their parents' bloodline, because I have so many kids, so like even though they may have that, isn't there a way that we could seal that doesn't have to happen through the proper counseling and teachings and finding out like why they're going to open that door, why they're going to do those things.
Erica?
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Erica Usher. I'm the prevention supervisor at Fayette County Drug and Alcohol. So prevention is my passion, right? And yes, there's absolutely things that we can do for individuals and for communities that make it less likely that addiction would occur. So when I think the best way that I like to explain to people is if you think about any disease and that there are things that you can do or situations that can occur that make it more likely for that disease to happen to an individual and things that make it less likely to happen. So the classic example is talking about heart disease, and that hits home for me because heart disease runs in my family, so I have strong family history of that. But does that mean that I'm going to die of heart disease? Not necessarily. Are there things that I could do that make it more likely I'm going to develop heart disease? Yes. I can eat poorly. I cannot exercise. I can smoke. All of those things are risk factors that are going to make it more likely. Are there things that I can do that help protect me from developing that disease? Absolutely. Exercise and get lots of rest and don't drink a lot and don't use tobacco products. So addiction as a disease follows that same pathway. There are things that make it more likely and things that make it less likely for it to occur. What we are not really good at as a community is understanding that concept and taking steps to minimize these risks and to promote these protective factors. And those are things like, I mean, they run the gamut of education is important, but education alone is not prevention. We need to make sure that substances aren't available for people, because if they are available, more people will use them. So that's one strategy. Making sure that we have, so another protective factor is connection to a religious organization. So that's absolutely something that's a protective factor for any individual. That's one of many. So there's a lot of things that we could do, but making sure that we come back to this science about what is effective and what really works and what's proven to work, and then doing that, something that I talk to Representative Dowling about often, right? About there are things that are proven, that's what we need to do, but just not everybody knows the things that are proven to work. And so if you're interested in that, let me just put in a plug for Fayette County has a Communities That Care coalition, and its focus is on risk and protective factors and understanding how we as a community, what are risks that are here in Fayette County, because we are not Greene County, and we're not Allegheny County, and we're not Cambria County. We're all different. We should know what our picture of risk is. Just like I know my picture of risk for heart disease is relatively high. I'm assuming comparing to most of you because that's my family history. Knowing what is our picture of risk and protection, then we can make some smart choices about what do we need to bump up and what do we need to address to minimize. So if you're interested in that, you can always look online. We have a website. Come and see me. I can give you information about Communities That Care. We want more people who are interested in that to do that and come and be on our team. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And that was kind of a great segue to a plug for our next meeting, which will take place in early May. Our topic of discussion, as we said, they're going to be vastly different. So tonight we really immersed ourselves into faith-based treatment options. But there are a lot of options out there, or a lot of different facets of addiction we'll be talking about. We do not have a date or location that has been set yet, but if you signed up online and used your email address, you'll receive an invitation to the next meeting. It'll also be advertised in the newspapers and so forth. But evidence-based prevention programs will be our next topic that we'll be talking about, and Erica will be one of our panelists on the panel to talk more about those programs, some of which are already taking place in public schools throughout Fayette County. I was very happy to learn over the weekend, as I was having a discussion in Somerset County, that Botfin Life Skills is being done in Somerset. So we'll be continuing our discussion throughout the 51st District about evidence-based prevention programs and what schools are using them, what schools are not using them, and how we can have conversations with the members of our school boards and principals to help get these programs, which, again, Fayette County Drug and Alcohol is a great resource because they have some trainers that can go out and train the teachers to put on programs. They have some funding and assistance for these programs. But evidence-based prevention will be the next topic that we'll be discussing in our meeting that is in early May. Before we close out this evening, and I am going to ask Jana if she has any closing remarks, and also the members of our panel. I do want to thank our partners to our panel, the organizations and businesses who have already signed on to be a kind of a partner in this discussion. And by that partnership, we're really hoping that they become regular attendees, that they help us find the topics that we need to discuss. And they're really just taking the next step to saying, we want to help with this epidemic throughout our community. So just a quick list of those, although they're on the back of your form: Fayette County Drug and Alcohol Commission, A Better Choice of Living, the American Heart Association, Confluence Lions Club, Congressman Bill Schuster of the PA 9th, Elk Lick Service Center, Fayette County Behavioral Health Administration, Lower Turkey Foot Township, Markleysburg Borough, Myersdale Public Library, New Seasons Uniontown Treatment Center, Pennsylvania 211 Southwest, which if you don't know about 211, you can call them for assistance on a number of issues, PA Public Utility Commission, Pathways of Southwestern Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, Pinto Home Care Agency, PIC HS, EHS of Fayette County, Somerset County Chamber of Commerce, Somerset Trust Company, Southwestern Pennsylvania Area Agency on Aging, the Uniontown Area School District Police, and the Boy Scouts of America Westmoreland Fayette Council. So we thank those who have stepped up to be partners in our program. There's no cost to do that. It's simply taking the next step to commit to be part of this ongoing public participation panel. So if you are not a partner and you're interested in doing so, you can sign up at repdowling.com. On the right-hand side, there is a public participation panel logo, which you can click on, and it takes you to the portal of our page that discusses that. I would invite our panelists, if you have any closing comments or anything you'd like to share with us, to do so.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for attending and listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Thank you so much for letting us be here. And I've been dying to say one thing since your last question or comment about the kids. I just wrote down Joshua 24:15. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I mean, that's where it starts. It starts with these parents that get real with God, and that's going to really help seal the door. So, and that's what we want to help. That's what the church is here for. We want to help parents do that and equip them to do that. And as far as working together, I think it'd be great for churches and other nonprofits to get together and do some fundraisers. I mean, when I walked in here tonight and I was looking at this amazing building, you know, I forget your name, I'm sorry, Alan, that's right. Alan was telling me that churches came together and built this facility. I was like, that's amazing. And that just goes to show what can happen when organizations and churches and people come together and they do things. You can build some amazing things. So I think if we did come together, we could do something special. So I know our church would be willing to participate. So thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming and listening to me. I really need to get my testimony out there because I feel like I have a strong testimony and I really want people to hear it. So that's definitely why I agreed to do this panel, and hopefully I won't be as nervous the more I give it. So, but I do appreciate everybody listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Jana, do you have any closing thoughts?
The faith-based community has been a great supporter for years. As Carla had mentioned, and as the other panelists have mentioned, 12-step programs, AA and NA meetings. Most of those meetings are housed and offered in religious organizations at churches, synagogues. Within Fayette County, we try to keep up with some of those meetings that are open and available for those in recovery and people who want to help people in recovery. So we do have a plethora of support, but what we can do is do what we're doing now, is continue the conversation and ask those in the faith-based community to help support people in recovery and walk with them through that process, and people in the community to walk with people in recovery, because it is a process. And it is ups and downs. It's not one level field, and it's not always a one time. It is a continuous process that everyone needs to work with other people for this process and for this addiction issue to come to an end. So I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your commitment, and I also thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Jana. we are going to close out the meeting here in just a couple moments, and we'll put on some background music. You don't have to rush out. I would encourage you to meet each other, talk to each other. You know, they say talk is cheap, and action is what we need. So I encourage you to come up with ways that we can assist you at the state level, but also ways that you can work together. I really believe that fighting this problem isn't something that government can do alone. It's going to have to be a grassroots movement, and this is a start or a continuation of the grassroots movement that's been happening here in Fayette and Somerset counties. I would encourage you to come back again. I know meetings like this may not be as much fun as going to the movies or going out to dinner, so I thank you for giving up your time and coming and kind of listening and participating. But I would encourage you next time to bring 2 additional people with you so that we can grow this conversation and have more hands and more feet willing to provide aid in this community epidemic. I said we will be sending out a notice about our May meeting, but I do just really encourage you to come back. I thank you for being here and encourage you to bring your friends. We will be posting tonight's video if someone's looking for something that was discussed at repdowling.com. Again, you can find that under the public participation panel link. I want to thank our presenters and Fayette County Drug and Alcohol for being a partner with us and being here tonight. Let's give them a quick round of applause. There's definitely a stigma that goes with addiction, and I have learned probably the most from those who have struggled with addiction and have found themselves in recovery. So I definitely want to take a special moment to thank Aaron and Thomas and the others in recovery this evening from our audience that shared with us. I know that's not an easy thing to do. I was a Boy Scout with Thomas years ago, and I'm just proud of the fact that he's been able to pull himself out of the situation he was in. With that, our topic tonight was faith-based, and so in closing, I guess, Pastor Aaron, I'd ask if you want to close us in a prayer. I think that may be appropriate.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's pray. Father God, we just come before you right now, and Lord, I thank you that we've been able to have this conversation tonight, Lord. I pray that it would be fruitful now, and Lord, I ask that you would have your will and way, Lord, in our state and across the country, Lord. And Lord Jesus, I just thank you that you are alive. I thank you that you delivered me, Lord, and I am what I am by your grace. And Lord, I thank you for the testimonies that you bring about every day, Lord, of transformed lives through the power of your word and by your spirit and might. And Lord, I ask that you would just continue to work mightily in all these people, Lord, all the churches that are represented here and the various organizations, Lord, to come together, Lord, for the common good to fight against addiction and fight against sin, and for you to be magnified in everything, Lord. And God, that would be my prayer. And Lord Jesus, I just thank you for this time together. Lord, I pray that we could get a faith-based organization started here, Lord, that would really minister to people, Lord, and have the freedom to proclaim your word to them and to really minister to their heart, their mind, their body, their soul, and their spirit. And Lord Jesus, I give it to you in faith, for it's in your holy and precious and wonderful, glorious name that I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yep.
Early May, evidence-based prevention. Please join us again to continue the conversation. Have a safe trip home. And like I said, don't rush out. Meet your friends and fellow constituents from the 51st District. And let's come up with a plan to help fight this community epidemic. Thank you.